The most expensive NASCAR tracks ever built cost over $250 million each, but the money had almost nothing to do with the racing. Because these tracks were not built to be better racetracks. They were weapons in a decades-long war between two families fighting for total control of the sport. Before we get into the list, you need to understand two companies. International Speedway Corporation, owned by the France family, the same family that founded NASCAR. They did not just sanction the races. They owned the tracks too. Daytona, Talladega. They controlled where NASCAR raced and how much it cost to get there. On the other side, Speedway Motorsports Incorporated, owned by a man named Bruton Smith, North Carolina car dealer turned promoter who co-founded Charlotte Motor Speedway back in 1959. That original track nearly bankrupted him. He lost control of his own speedway and spent over a decade trying to buy his way back in. That is important. Remember that. By the 1990s, these two companies were in an all-out land grab. Every new track was a chess move. Every market was a territory. And the budgets got insane. For context, the original Daytona International Speedway cost about $3 million in 1959. Talladega Superspeedway cost between $4 and $6 million in 1969. Built on a former Air Force base, 2,000 acres, 33-degree banking, speeds that would eventually force the invention of the restrictor plate. All of it for less than what a single luxury suite tower costs at a modern speedway. I am ranking these by construction costs at the time that they were built. If there's a tie, the tiebreaker is the total money spent over the facility's lifetime. Let's get into it. $2 million does not sound expensive for a racetrack, and it was not supposed to be. The original budget was about $700,000. Bruton Smith and his partner Curtis Turner, a former moonshine runner turned stock car driver, sold shares to local investors and broke ground on what they hoped would rival Daytona. Then they hit granite. Literal granite. The ground under turns 1 and 2 was solid rock. $700,000 went to dynamite alone just to clear it. The budget was gone before a single grandstand even went up. By the time the track opened in 1960, Smith and Turner were over $800,000 in debt. By December 1961, that number crossed $1 million. The track filed for bankruptcy. Smith was forced out of his own speedway. The man who co-founded the place could not even make decisions about it anymore. He would spend the next 15 years clawing his way back to ownership. If you ever want to understand why Bruton Smith spent the rest of his life building the biggest, most expensive tracks imaginable, it starts right here. He got humiliated once. He made sure it never happened again. Now, fast forward to today. Charlotte has seen hundreds of millions in cumulative upgrades. Condos above Turn 1, a 7-story tower, a $1.7 million permanent lighting system in 1992 that made it the first modern speedway to host night racing. A $60 million drag strip, the world's largest HD video board, but it all started with granite, dynamite, and bankruptcy. Now keep that origin story in mind because the numbers are about to get ridiculous. Number 4, Las Vegas Motor Speedway, $200 million in 1996. From $2 million to $200 million. That is not a typo. That is how much the economics of building a NASCAR track changed in less than 40 years. Casino owners Ralph Engelstad and William Bennett funded Las Vegas Motor Speedway in the mid-90s. 1,200 acres in the Nevada desert, a full super speedway, a drag strip, a dirt oval, road courses, the works. It opened in 1996. By 1998, it was sold. The buyer was Bruton Smith. Remember him, the guy who got kicked out of his own track? Well, he was back, and he was spending. SMI paid $215 million in cash. The bid that outbid the France family by roughly $15 million. Think about that. A facility that cost $200 million to build sold for $215 million just 2 years later. The original owners barely broke even. But Smith didn't care about return on their investment. He cared about the market. Las Vegas was the entertainment capital of the world. Keeping that track out of ISC's hands was worth every single dollar of the premium. Here's the kicker though. The track only had 12 degrees of banking when it opened. The racing was mediocre. It took a full decade before anybody reconfigured it with 20-degree progressive banking to actually improve the competition. They also added a fan zone, rebuilt pit road, all in 2006. The facility had been open for 10 years before anybody seriously addressed whether the actual racing was any good. $200 million, and the racing was an afterthought. You're going to hear that a lot in this video. If you're finding this breakdown interesting, do me a quick favor and subscribe. We cover stories behind NASCAR that most people never hear about. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Number 3, Texas Motor Speedway, $250 million in 1997. Remember how Charlotte cost $2 million? Bruton's next Superspeedway cost 125 times that. In late 1994, Smith announced plans for a massive new track in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. Groundbreaking started in 1995, more than 4 million cubic yards of earth moved. 13 million pounds of galvanized steel, 205 executive skybox suites, 159,000 seats. That made it the second largest sports facility in the United States. Initial construction was $150 million. An additional $100 million followed after the 1997 opening, $250 million total. And Smith was not shy about it. This was aimed directly at the France family. The message was simple. I can build bigger than you, and I can do it in your backyard. Now, was the racing any good? Oh boy. The original design featured a dual banked layout meant to accommodate both stock cars and open wheel cars. When CART attempted to hold a race there in 2001, drivers experienced such extreme G-forces that the event was canceled 2 hours before the green flag. Drivers reported dizziness and tunnel vision. Paul Tracy set a qualifying lap of nearly 240 miles per hour. At those speeds, on that banking, human bodies were hitting their physical limits. Texas Motor Speedway did not get a significant repave and reconfiguration until 2017, 20 years after the opening. $250 million, and it took 2 decades to get the actual track surface right. That's like buying a $30 million mansion and not fixing the plumbing until 2044. Number 2, Kansas Speedway, $250 million in 2001. Same price as Texas, different family. Kansas Speedway was the France family's counterpunch. ISC announced the project in 1997. 1,200 acres in Wyandotte County, 11 million cubic yards of soil removed, 2 million cubic yards of rock, 82,000 seats, 68 luxury suites. Total cost sat around $250 million. Funded through a mix of ISC private investment and local incentives, including $24 million in the publicly backed STAR programs. Those were the first bonds ever issued under that Kansas program. The justification was economic impact. Officials projected that the Speedway would generate over $200 million annually for the state. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Building Kansas Speedway required the displacement of 146 homeowners. The local government used eminent domain to acquire the land. Some owners sued over the valuations they were offered. Legal battles delayed construction by months, pushing the opening from 2000 to 2001. Families lost their homes so that a corporation could build grandstands in a territorial war with another corporation. Kansas opened with 82,000 seats. By 2019, capacity had been reduced to 48,000. That is a $250 million facility that lost over 40% of its seats in less than 20 years. You want to know what that looks like? It looks like upper deck sections entirely covered in tarps on race day. It looks like a facility built for a demand that never existed. Number 1, Daytona International Speedway, Daytona Rising, $400 million in 2016. The most expensive construction project in NASCAR history, and it was not even a new track. The original Daytona International Speedway cost about $3 million when Bill France Sr. built it in 1959. France had to beg for funding. A Texas oil millionaire loaned him $600,000 in construction equipment. Pepsi contributed after Coca-Cola turned him down. When money ran out, France literally sold advance race tickets to finish building the track. Engineer Charles Moneypenny invented a new paving method on the spot, connecting machinery to bulldozers anchored at the top of the banking because nothing could grip a 31-degree incline. He patented the technique and later used it to build Talladega in Michigan. That $3 million track became the most important venue in American motorsports. It launched the Daytona 500. It changed the sport forever, and it was built by a man who mortgaged his own house to finish it. Now compare that to Daytona Rising, $400 million, completed in January 2016, just in time for the Daytona 500. 40 escalators, 17 elevators, 5 redesigned entrances they called injectors, 3 concourse levels spanning nearly a mile of front stretch, over 60 luxury suites, twice as many restrooms, 3 times as many concession stands, every single front stretch seat ripped out and replaced with wider, more comfortable seating. It won the Sports Business Journal's Sports Facility of the Year award. Very fancy. The result was approximately 101,000 permanent seats, which was actually fewer seats than before the renovation. I need you to sit on that for a second. $400 million. Fewer seats, better bathrooms, more escalators, but the track itself, the 31-degree banking, the 2.5-mile tri-oval, the layout that produces some of the most thrilling racing in the world, that has not changed since 1959. Bill France built the foundation for $3 million. ISC spent $4 million upgrading everything around it. The one thing that actually makes Daytona special was the one thing they did not touch. So what do all these tracks have in common? Seriously, I'm asking you, because this is a strange list if you think about it. Let's see, they were all built or rebuilt between the late 50s and 2017. They span 5 different states, some are owned by ISC, some by SMI. The original Charlotte cost less than some people's houses. Daytona Rising cost more than most professional sports stadiums. But here is the biggest unifier. What caused these budgets to balloon often had nothing to do with the racing. A track does not cost $250 million because of its asphalt. It costs that much because of suites, seats, hospitality towers, escalators, and corporate leverage. The money went to suites first, seats second, hospitality third. The racing surface came last. Texas spent 20 years with a flawed track layout. Las Vegas spent a decade with inadequate banking. Kansas displaced 146 families to build grandstands that would be torn out within 2 decades. And across the board, the seat counts tell the real story. Texas dropped from 160,000 to around 112,000. Charlotte from over 170,000 to 95,000. Kansas from 82,000 to 48,000. Those were not renovations, those were demolitions. The massive grandstands were never really a response to fan demand. They were a negotiating tactic. If your track held 160,000 people, you could point to that number when lobbying NASCAR for a second race date. More seats meant more projected revenue. More projected revenue meant more leverage. The spending was never about the spectator experience. It was about territory. Bruton Smith passed away in 2022. The France family merged ISC back into NASCAR in 2019. The era of 2 competing empires building $250 tracks to outflank each other is over. The next time you watch a track at Texas or Kansas or Daytona, look past the competition. Look at the tarped off upper decks, the luxury suites with dark windows, the grandstands that used to hold 170,000 people, now holding half of that. Those are not just empty seats, they are ruins of a war that both sides lost. I think the takeaway here is pretty clear. Spending a lot of money on a racetrack does not guarantee good racing. The best racing in NASCAR still happens at Daytona, the same track that cost $3 million and was paved by a guy who had to invent the right equipment to do it. You do not need $400 million to make great racing. You need the right banking, the right layout, and the right surface. Everything else is just furniture. Let me know which track on this list surprised you the most. And if you want more stories like this, the ones that go deeper than what happened and into why it happened, subscribe and hit the bell. We got a lot more coming.